Normally, ports of a AAA title to handheld are half-hearted or failed attempts at recreating the console version. Some examples are games like Quest Brian's Journey, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, among others. Then there are those games that try a different approach and work to some extent or are good games. Games like the Harry Potter Japanese role-playing style games or Lord of the Rings movie games that are more so a Diablo style game, and these are great examples of this. The GBA version of Lord of the Rings Third Age is not one of these games. It tries to do some unique things, but at the end of the day, it fails at what the console version was. But first, let's get some perspective on the game in question first. The development of the game is pretty typical for a license owned by EA. It was developed by Kryptonite, published by Electronic Arts, and released in 2004. I've already covered this development team before. If you want to know more, go check out my reviews of games like Lord of the Rings The Two Towers for the Game Boy Advance. Plot scraps plot the console version for one more based around the movies. This pretty much gives you, or at least me, no real reason to care about the plot unless the mythology interests you or you haven't seen the movies. In either case, you're better off watching the movies or reading the books based around the mythology of Lord of the Rings. Not to mention, I liked how the console version felt like you were one of the soldiers out on the battlefield of these fights, rather than, the typical heroes like, oh, I played as, Aragon half a dozen times, I'm done doing that. I want to see what it's like being like one of the soldiers out there fighting orcs and stuff like that. How J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about all these other side characters that weren't integral to the plot but had their own ventures during the War of the Ring. The graphics are okay, I guess. Here's my thing. Around this time, either the DS was announced or was already out. Even for the time, the 3D realism looked really dated. Sure, it was as good as probably the GBA could do. The problem is that it pixelated, looks like smeared stills, and it's blocky as all hell. Does a decent enough job of recreating characters. The problem is that at the end of the day, you knew that third-party developers were ready to move on from the GBA onto the DS. The audio is passable for the GBA, but again, DS let me in the back. It really showed GBA's age in 2004. The music is a good interpretation of Lord of the Rings movie soundtrack. The problem is that fact that the MIDI format was really starting to show its age. Songs sounded scratchy and again really showed why we should move on from the GBA to the DS, or why third party was planning on moving from the GBA to the DS. Sound effects suffered from the same fate as well, but it was nice to hear, Aragon's battle cry or attack orcs in a GBA game. The gameplay has ambition, but it's not a very refined game. At best, it needed a few more months in the cooker. The game is a grid-based strategy game with role-playing elements mixed in. Very unique in the way it does it. The board is split into 3 different rows. The goal of each mission is to score victory points by killing units or capturing certain spots on the map. At the start of each level, you select a different captain for each row. Most of the time it's 3, but for some missions it's 2 or even 1. Each of them also has a bunch of minor units you can command. Each unit can affect another unit from another row if you have the range. They also basically are broke down into 3 different kinds of characters: melee, ranged, or a mix of both. Later on, you can get different monsters from mythology, such as tree giants and other sort of units. The captains can also give different bonuses, have different abilities they can use, can attack other units, level up, and most importantly, have a dice roll number for how many units can act. Well, for that specific row. Depending on how much damage you deal to a unit in a turn, cause units to panic and run away for a few turns. This leaves them vulnerable to attack, and it can be a game changer if it's done to a very strong captain to possibly turn the tide of battle. You can also get battle effect, whether it be good or bad, based on what I like to call board control. Now, board control is a term I use for trading card games, video games, board games, whatever. Board control, to put it simple, is how close you are from winning. It can be how big of a presence you have on the battlefield, how much you are dominating your opponent, and so on. In Lord of the Rings Third Age, based on how the fight is going, you may get a bonus move, attack bonus for units, or it can be an ass and debuff your unit. And it can be activated at the start of the turn, which is a big problem. Instead of dealing them out based on how the game is going, they come at random and seem to pop up at the worst possible time. I would like to ask a question, if I may. Did no one try this gameplay feature out on a board game while designing it? Like, the way the game plays, it might as well be a board game. It's about as random as playing Light Sworns in Yu-Gi-Oh! Around 2010. Come on, guys. You should really play test these features before you even run them. The thing that kills this game for me is dice roll mechanic for movement. Each row has a set number of units you can move per turn based on the dice roll you got from your captain. If there's no captain, you get a coin flip on whether or not you get to move one unit. Problem is that you can really fuck over good players if they roll the minimal. Now, I got a question. Why would this ever work for a good strategy game? Introducing a range for the number of units you can move to a battle system that is already known for dice roll mechanic damage is just setting up players for aggravation. It just serves to show players you are under the complete mercy of RNJesus. I've had games pretty much end at turn 5 and others take forever because my opponent's units couldn't move enough spaces to make up for the lack of moves they got on their roll. The worst part is you have to wait until your opponent gets those 3 points because you get no experience points quit out in the middle of a mission. Not to mention, for how many units you get, you'll be lucky to get at times half the number of moves move any of those units. This leaves players with units sitting there, taking hits and dying because of how the game rewards an aggressive playstyle. If you don't force aggression all the time in this game, because you can't really stockpile those moves, the game rerolls them at the start of the next turn. So there's no way to play with any kind of defense because you will sooner lose your mind trying to do so. Thing is, there are some cool concepts that make it a little different, such as using experience points to upgrade your characters. There's 2 campaigns to play through, one for good, one for evil, and I like nice attempt at standing out. The problem is that when battles go on forever, how poorly play tested it is, all it really amounts to putting lipstick on a pig. It's a nice touch. It's still pig lipstick on. It's not gonna be Marilyn Monroe. Overall, the GBA version of Lord of the Rings Third Age is probably one of the worst grid-based strategy games I've ever played in my life. Third Age was a cash-in on the console version, which was a cash-in on the movie life. The thing is that barely an excuse for how poorly designed this game is. To be a really bad grid-based strategy RPG in my book, it has poorly designed, drawn out, boring all the time. Very few have ever done it from what I know, and the GBA version of the Third Age does all 3 very well. I could forgive its outdated presentation for a 2004 game if it was a serviceable game, but it isn't. If you want a good grid-based strategy game on the GBA, then go play the Shining Force remake. There are better games out there, not only on the system or even in genre, and Electronic Arts probably didn't care. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 10. I'm giving it mercy more so because how much I like the franchise and them attempting at making something unique.